Stories are told of the future of USA facing a chaotic disaster of mass death, where the survival of civilization is in question, and the survivors are tested to their extreme limits. The future from then could either be the end of everything that has not already ended, or eventually, the beginning of a whole new world. But there was a time a quarter of a millennium ago when history was making such a decision in USA. Thankfully, the relatively good side won, and for that, we have a presidential timeline of USA that involves parties falling and new ones rising, instead of the permanent result beyond all public influence. Now think of all the countries that have done this more recently. Maybe some are doing it now. And which ones will start next? It's easy to see how important it is that we get the right outcomes, because in tyrants' hands, it could be centuries of oppression for a consequence. Before we remember the war and the Murican people who died for the greater good, it's necessary to explain that they really were the nice side who was fighting for the greater good. Set up context. Look back to 1775 when the 13 colonies were a part of UK, the same way that modern Canada, for now, and Australia are, as well as some transphobic abomination lands. Is there any wonder USA wanted nothing to do with UK? Proto-USA, pre-USA, call them what you will, wanted one or the other of these options. No more tax, or to get places in Parliament, the same way Wales, Scotland, and back then Ireland did. Neither of these is unreasonable, but monarch fans like to moan that British people paid 20 times more tax than 13 colonies. The smaller tax 13 colonies paid was used to manage the 13 colonies themselves. Not unreasonable. So why is it that USA got a revolution, but Wales didn't? Neither did Scotland, despite centuries of trying. Is USA greedier or selfisher? Every male adult in 13 colonies had their vote in a regional politician in some way. Meanwhile, long before the Electoral Commission, only one Scot in every 250 adult Scots had any influence in the MP for their vote zone. So again, why did USA rebel, but not Scotland, eventually? Is USA more greedy? The answer to these is, it doesn't work that way. The oppression that you are a victim of is personally harmful. It doesn't come in numbers or involve strangers. The important thing is someone's right to live free, and therefore everyone's right to live free, including yourself. The perfect solution would be optional taxes for all and legit methods for recruiting leaders everywhere. Besides, 13 colonies wasn't in power to rebel for non-English Britain. They were only in any position to stand up for themselves. People also argue about the Boston Massacre. The story is a crowd of hundreds of civilians, many of them were drunk, were throwing stones at 20 soldiers. Those soldiers ran out of endurance and shot at the crowd. Out of the hundreds, only 5 of them ended up dead, because they used minimum force. If this was to happen today, the newspapers would back up the soldiers and the revolution would stop before it began. Even if the revolution is right. But what do I say about this? When a soldier is in uniform, they represent the government exactly as it is. The reason I didn't join the Navy or Marines is because I didn't want to be responsible for everything the government does. They were not just throwing stones at 20 soldiers, they were throwing stones at 20 guardians of education, monarchy, mandatory taxes, bad drug supporters, segregators, cult members, fake services, and so on. They deserved stones thrown at them. Even with exaggerating of the case, which is very common in news, you need to look at the fundamental story in complex cases. The fundamental case here is UK was to a level oppressing 13 colonies, and 13 colonies had every right to put a stop to it. The run-up to the war is iconic for the UK having a professional army, marching in strict lines, dressed in bright colours, versus guerrilla locals dressed in camouflage, ambushing them then running. The UK soldiers were trained and did this full-time. The colonies were amateurs and young. But the colonies did get something right. The first battle of the war was in Lexington. This is where the famously named "shot heard around the world" happened. No one knows which side fired it, but the result of that day was a win for colonies because when British got to Concord, they were surprise attacked again, so much that their strict inline army was scattered, out of shape and lost. So it became a much more equal battlefield with neither side having their head on top of the events. The UK retreated, regrouped, and then went to Charleston, which was then sieged by colonies. In spite of this win, colonies knew this kind of winning streak was never going to last. If they didn't build up their numbers, practice their skills, and develop roles and commands to fit a wide, complex duty, then as time went on, the advantage would go to UK. Since the ancient world, every warrior has known that no one wins wars without discipline, teamwork, and fitness. So colonies got their hands on who they could and hired coaches to train a ragtag team of fighters into a presentable army. One of those coaches was an ex-Prussian officer. It pays to have experience, which is something they knew and didn't want to go without. And to really understand this win, we need to think about the sizes of the forces involved. Colonies actually outnumbered UK 2.35 to 1. But the ratio in kills is 2.87 to 1. So yes, colonies can actually boast. But I believe even one soldier can make all the difference, so if the numbers had been equal, would the kill ratio have been more than 1 to 1? Or would missing the number advantage have affected that to all the way, pushing the outcome to the other side? That question is scary enough to get generals thinking. The moral here is, in the event you are outgunned and you don't have an established military, Rule 1, guerrilla. Rule 2, break up your enemy's plan. Rule 3, create a legit army to be feared. The setup to the Battle of Breed's Hill is 13 colonies were getting more soldiers every day, the rebellion was going strong, and they were sieging Boston. North of Boston is a peninsula with Charlestown. Colonies expected UK to try and take back that peninsula, and so sent soldiers to fortify Bunker Hill. But by screw-up or better idea, they fortified a different hill, which was closer to the front line, so never mind. A possible factor in the change was this was done at night. With the stage set, UK came. The outcome was UK took the peninsula, but lots more of them died than their enemies. So with colony support growing, a kill ratio like 3.1 to 1 is still much appreciated. It's also what you would expect because an attacker trying to take something over would want to be 3 times more powerful than defenders. So 3 times more of them dying is logical. It also complements UK that they only outnumbered USA nearly 2 to 1. So to still be able to take something over says a lot. If you want to call this a UK win, it was an expensive win in circumstances they wouldn't want to pay. At this rate, colonies would be able to retake the peninsula sooner or later because one army is growing and the other is shrinking. This idea was backed up because when the time came for UK to bombard Charlestown's harbour, they were defeated. There's a reason modern Massachusetts shares a country with Arkansas and Missouri, not with Wales and North Ireland. In the short time after the Battle of Breed's Hill, USA developed a professional army, not something that would earn them much negotiation power internationally, but definitely going in the right direction. The rest of that year was full of battles, and for the most part USA was winning. A particular high point was when UK went south, hoping some colonies would not join in the fighting. Some of those people tried to stop the North, and they failed beautifully. 13 colonies were, in that time at least, loving it. The moral here is, don't be discouraged. Between the blocked attack on Charleston Harbour and the Battle of Trenton, things took a turn for the worse. UK annexed New York and held the initiative for all of summer in 1776. For those of you new to the whole strategy subject, initiative is one of the most important words for you to learn, up there with flank. Initiative means making decisions faster than your enemy, and, with your actions, deciding what questions they'll have to ask, instead of them deciding what questions you have to ask. So it's like controlling the script of the war. Imagine being in a war where you're attacked by your enemy, and as soon as your general thinks of a genius plan to stop them, your enemy is sending a whole new wave of attacks that your general didn't plan for. You're probably going to lose. The perfect example of initiative is making your moves faster than your enemy can think of a defense plan for each of them. So by your final wave, they're defenseless and everyone is where you want them. So now that we all understand initiative, imagine a whole season of your enemy having the initiative. It was a dark time for the rebellion, but it was also one of the most important. This is when the character of the USA grew into actually the USA. So far, they only wanted a place in Parliament or no taxes, but from then on, they wanted nothing to do with UK at all. This is when they decided there was no place in a free world for a monarch. They stopped toasting to UK health and started a long journey which would lead to their constitution 11 years later, which, however bad you think of it, is a lot better than it nearly was. But they needed more morale, and that only comes from success. There was something they could do. Forget Santa Claus. On December 25th and 26th, 1776, there were real holiday heroes. A town called Trenton was being occupied by German mercenaries called Hessian working for UK. But in this war, Hessian were infamously badly managed and slow to act and travel, which in a war makes you next to useless. So USA killed their commander and partially liberated the town. In the process, they got their hands on supplies they were desperate for. Oh, never mind, there is another way to get more morale. When all else fails, give them treats. That New Year's, they weren't going to be watching fireworks. They were going to be saving the world. Next stop, Princeton. And a few days into the new year 1777, they took a second town back. Things were going from bad to better. It wasn't retaking New York, but it was a start, and lots better than nothing, or what had been happening recently. The nation already had a plan, but they had given it a new hope. USA outnumbered UK exactly 2-1, but the kill difference is 26-1, and this was USA going on the attack, so I would have wondered if this was a USA win if the number had been 1-3. This is a way to show the weakness of the Hessian and the smart choice of the USA of what to do and where to target. Like predators, they hunted weaker prey and got rewards. Good choice. No wonder the general of these battles would become president. Mind you, we should be glad he didn't lose the election to an obese alcoholic pacifist, as could happen in democracy. The moral here is, when everything seems to be going bad, look for easy or small wins and get that, because little things do big things. Try to imagine the joy you're going to feel in C.D.M.D. when you're overrun from your base, separated from your team, and outmatched by the Horde, and then you find a load of tablets of chocolate. That should cheer you up. Before World Trade Centers were being crashed in, September 11th was a day of survival for the USA. It's also the anniversary of the Battle of Brandywine. The UK was coming for the USA in a natural, rough environment, slow to walk in. UK sneaked up on USA's right and left squads and eliminated them both. Now, the middle squad was enveloped, but thanks to the escape skill of the USA, Only few Muricans died after that part. They decided to retreat and had something called a rearguard, some soldiers who stay behind to delay an enemy so the others have more time to escape. As the escape happens, the rearguards then need to run for it themselves, often having to stop and start a few times to delay the enemy again. This big survival means USA could fight again, so it's similar to Battle of Breeds Hill situation. UK wins, but not by much. The moral here is, don't be too stupid to run. If you can't win, survive. The battles of Trenton and Princeton cheered the USA up, but it was the Battle of Saratoga that solved their problems. UK was still objectively winning. Further south, UK was annexing places such as Philadelphia, which was close next to Brandywine, which was happening a number of days before Battle of Saratoga. So the pressure was on up north to get a win because it wasn't going so well anywhere else. UK sent soldiers from what is now Canada with a plan to conquer the Hudson River and all towns near it, and isolate New England from the rest of USA. I'm not sure that's a good plan because then you're fighting on two fronts, and if you have guards all along a line, then you have a wall of soldiers, and those don't work because someone will find one weak part of your wall, echelon that, and then flank you the rest of the way, or send an army through the hole they made and make your line useless. But it never even got to that. UK couldn't even make it past Vermont before a showdown in Bennington where not only did they fail to take the place, but they lost 1,000 soldiers in the failure. Note that most of those soldiers were not killed, they were taken prisoner. USA plan here was to slow UK down enough until UK quit and go back. At the beginning of this fight, UK outnumbered USA by a lot. An all-out face-off would have been suicide. This tactic got a good start. It got UK thinking. UK split up and tried to go around USA squads instead of through. The forest would cover them, so it was definitely possible, and so. USA noticed what they were doing and split themselves up to hunt down each enemy squad. One of them was able to continue. They fought USA away, but at a price that made them wonder if it was a step to victory. Another of them was repelled, but both squads survived. What happened next was intense fort building for both sides getting ready for whatever would happen next. What did happen next was a weird marketing case. Both sides had been calling for reinforcements. USA took some convincing but finally got lots. They started this fight with 3,000 soldiers and now they had 12,000 new ones. So, although the total for this whole event has USA outnumbering the UK 3-2, that's only true in total. For any actual bit of it, it's not true. UK started with 10,000 and outnumbered USA 19-5. At the end, roughly the opposite was true. The reason UK didn't get any new soldiers at this time was because, when they called for them, the guy in charge of answering their call, despite being reasonably close, couldn't go because his boss was away. Then send someone else to command the soldiers. It's not all about you. I know I've talked so much about being organized in this memorial, but this is the part where I say you can be too organized. Stop being too strict for your own good. If you make up a silly rule to hurt your side, then you've done something worse than break your silly rule. The USA was very happy with that decision. This meant they won the rest of the battle easy by surrounding UK, so they had no choice but to surrender. And that was thousands of people who were soldiers and became prisoners, all because an office couldn't replace one person for one mission. The morals are, if you can't stop them, slow them down, and be flexible enough to not glue every job to a person. People need to be replaceable at any time. Idiots! The USA thanks you for your stupidity. In the winter of 1777 to 1778 Common Era, there was a climate and survival disaster for USA. all good preppers teach to be ready for nature before you're ready to fight, and this is why. 2,500 USA soldiers died of cold and hunger that winter. They were camping in a valley, meanwhile UK was comfortable inside a nearby town and survived winter just fine. For context of how serious 2,500 people is, here is the soldier populations of some battles in that war. In some battles, it's lots more than the population on either side, and even when 2,500 is smaller, it's still a big fraction that would have made all the difference. In a war with coats, gloves, and so on, there is no excuse for soldiers to be dying of cold. There's no point in training to kill enemies if you're dead before you see any. War is an outside activity, and all outside activity needs to think about weather. So basic lesson, but something even modern armies sometimes forget: always be ready for the cold. It doesn't take much equipment, but it can save your life and win you battles. To solve hunger, keep careful note of your supplies. If you're going to be starving soon, you want to know with some notice so you can order more food before that's a problem. Because fighting a fit enemy when you're starving is suicide. You need to be in perfect shape if you want to stand a chance. After you've achieved that, it's all about good management. 1780 wasn't a good year for USA, but October's always good. Whether by skill, strategy, or luck, UK was getting some big wins in Carolina, 2 of the 13 colonies. And it all started because some Muricans enjoyed the UK. Even today we hear rumours of Muricans wanting a monarch or to ban guns or more education and so on. If you remember, there was space for arguing at the start of the war about if it was the right thing to do, but when arguments are answered, they still don't end. It's the way of democracy. It got so bad that a mini-civil war happened in Carolina between rebel Muricans who wanted USA and loyal people living in North America who wanted UK. Rebels were coming, and Loyal's plan was to run to a defendable place in what is now Cherokee County, North Carolina, specifically Kings Mountain. But it's actually more of a hill because it's only 317 meters above sea level. That very barely meets a very generous definition of a mountain, 300 meters or higher. The Loyals went up hoping to fight off a rebel attack. It didn't seem like an ambitious idea at the time. In this battle, there were 200 more soldiers on the Loyal side than on the rebels. If this plan had worked, it would have copied the Roman success that won them a war against the Celts, when the Celts went up the hill to kill the Romans, but the Romans were so defensive that they killed so many Celts until Celts lost too many soldiers to continue battle. History seemed to be on Loyal's side, but we got 2 different outcomes from these 2 similar battles. Rebels surrounded the hill, so there was no walking down. Loyal survival depended on them defending their place on that hill. Rebels snuck up the hill, shot at Loyals, and so Loyals charged with bayonets, so Rebels ran away and escaped. Then they came back. Then they walked back up and shot at Loyals again, and back came the bayonets, and repeat this whole cycle until the Loyals' major died. That's when Loyals started surrendering. But, well, although Rebels had a usable chain of command, they also had enthusiasm. They kept killing the enemy whether they surrendered or not, which is not really a good idea. This happened until all 6 group leaders of the mission got some control back of their soldiers and stopped them killing surrenderers. In the end, there were twice as many Loyal prisoners as Loyal dead bodies, so it wasn't such a mess up. The kill ratio was roughly 3.6 to 1 with Rebels winning, the opposite of what would be expected for an attacker versus a defender. And if you take prisoners into account, the ratio is roughly 7.8 prisoners, 3.6 dead Loyals, 1 dead rebel. I think there's a reason the Loyals don't appear much in history books after this. Is it too late to change the name of the hill? The moral here is, you can't just copy a historical move and expect the same result, because your plan may be missing a detail from theirs, or maybe they have a skill or tool that you can't copy. It's not enough to know your history, because strategy is its own subject. You need to study that first and back up your plan with evidence from that. For 3 months then, USA was living it up in North Carolina. The loyal threat was destroyed and the UK was struggling to keep up with USA's speed. UK was sick of this and summoned the colonels with the biggest, scariest reputations. The ones who took part in some of the war's biggest massacres against USA, such as Camden, or defeats against USA, such as the Battle of Breed's Hill. Knowing the threat, the USA split their army into 2 teams. One would continue to face off against UK on frontline, the other would go and slow down UK's supply deliveries. Some action later, the supply wreck team was being chased by UK's worst and scariest. But there was a trap. They ran to cow pens, where the frontline team was waiting behind some trees and a hill. When UK chased after them, it was an ambush! When it was finished, the kill ratio was roughly 2-1, USA wins. The only reason it was as low as that was because USA mercifully took in a lot of prisoners. A few escaped, but that doesn't change the conclusion. The ratio including prisoners is 2 dead UK, 1 dead USA, 11.4 UK prisoners. And the starting numbers were roughly the same. What a win! The moral is, just because you're big now, doesn't mean you should be ashamed to use the easy old tactics that worked for you so far. The war had passed from one side to another and another as if ping-pong. Or an election history with bad voters. But now a winner was to be decided once and for all. In 1781 was the Siege of Yorktown. We all know the result of it because we live in a world where you can personally buy a gun in Virginia without being treated on the same level as a terrorist. Recently, people elected a Republican president, instead of a president by another name being imposed on them with no voter having a voice and no chance of the party being voted away in 4 years. France was an ally to USA. Most of their part was small, but they attacked the UK Navy, which was useful because USA had no navy of their own yet. But thankfully, the east coast is so long that not even the UK was able to blockade it, so supplies could come for USA easily. But that didn't mean French attacks on UK Navy were unnecessary. You can never cause your enemy too much grief. And France helped finish the whole thing in Yorktown by providing a blockade so that a coast town could be attacked from all directions. So when Obama says, France has been supportive to USA,
France is our oldest ally. The French people have stood shoulder to shoulder with the United States time and again. And we want to be very clear that we stand together with them whenever these kinds of attacks happened. We've always been able to count on the French people to stand with us. They have been an extraordinary counterterrorism partner, and we intend to be there with them in that same fashion.
He's right. It only would have taken very few battles to go differently for USA to never rise as a country. Without French support, would we know a different world map? The revolution was so advanced now that USA and France both outnumbered UK alone, let alone together. USA sent soldiers from Virginia and New York, France sent land soldiers from Rhode Island, and a navy fleet from West Indies, Caribbean. UK called for supplies and reinforcements from their navy, but they didn't come, because the rest of UK noticed something obvious. Yorktown was soon to be under siege. This is important because, according to a rough count through history, out of 10 sieges, 7 will be won by the attacker, 2 will be won by the defender, and the last one is not sure because it's the range of estimate. So a siege is not something you want to be in. UK knew that and didn't want to waste supplies on a doomed project, and they didn't want to send more ships into a trap. USA and France attacked Yorktown outposts, forcing UK to abandon them. The siege itself lasted 13 days and included heavy artillery used against the town. The defense was failing. The extra low bit was when they attempted to evacuate, a storm stopped them before France had the chance. The inevitable happened. UK surrendered. Thanks to the result of this battle, the next year and a half was full of negotiations with the rest of UK for an armistice. What both sides realised was they could keep fighting, but would rather not. UK now believed another North American territory was not worth trying to claim it from very rebellious locals. A mutual understanding happened, and they decided it was enough. The conclusion was France had their revenge for 7-Year War, and USA could start its long story that continues today, and seems to be, for the present at least, still going strong 250 years later. Some older lessons we can learn from this for when your future country tries to rise one day. Don't underestimate smaller enemies. It's not always brute strength that wins the war. Negotiation matters. And we should be interested in foreign events. How did we learn that last lesson from this? Well, this is the story of what happened in some places after the war. Events in the USA influenced France. Although France was valiant to fight for USA, it was paid for by a king using money that came from people who were already angry at the state of the country. It was already in poverty, famine, and plague. So spending lots of money on a foreign war was unappreciated at the time. Mix that with inspiration of Murican liberty, and it's a recipe for rebellion. So France had their own revolution. They also had a reign of terror between better things. Polish soldiers who fought for USA returned home and led a rebellion against Prussia and Russia. But then Prussia and Russia returned for revenge. But at least there was any hope of any improvement. Would you rather nothing and no chance? More successfully, thanks to French protection, Holland and Italy were able to have their revolutions, which stayed. Haiti had a slave revolt and got colonists out of power. Activists of liberty started to appear in Colombia, Argentina, and Ecuador. So as you can see, whether they be small or big differences, a good thing in one country can cause good things in other countries too. So we should be wanting, or even go as far as supporting, good things to be happening in other countries. Because what if bad things there spread to home? I will see you in the apocalypse. And subscribe to survive.